Honorable Commission members, my name is Samuel Zurier. I'm a Providence resident. I serve on the City Council. I'm here today to testify concerning the need to amend and clarify the right to education set forth in Article 12 of Rhode Island's Constitution. In a decision this spring, the Rhode Island Supreme Court held there is no meaningful, judicially recognized constitutional right to education in our state. This ruling, which confirmed and extended a 1995 decision, places Rhode Island outside of the national mainstream with regard to what many people consider the civil rights issue of the 21st century. We have known about the importance of the right to education since at least 1954, when our United States Supreme Court had this to say in its Brown versus Board of Education decision, and I quote, "Today, education is perhaps the most important function of state and local governments. In these days, it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he is denied the opportunity of an education. Such an opportunity, where the state has undertaken to provide it, is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms." As true as this was in 1954, it is even more so today. Right now, you could have two babies in adjacent rooms at Women's and Infants Hospital. As of their birth, they have equal rights and potential for an equally successful life. But if one child goes home to poverty in Pawtucket, while the other child goes home to an upper-middle-class family in Narragansett, their public school educations will be dramatically different, as will their prospects for success in life. To find a better alternative, we can look to our neighbor to the north, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The Bay State has the best public education system in the country as measured by the national test called Our Nation's Report Card, providing almost every child with a meaningful and rigorous education regardless of their place of residence or station in life. This begs the question, why does Massachusetts do so much better than we can in Rhode Island? I believe the answer lies in the two states' constitutions, as interpreted by their courts in decisions around 20 years ago. In 1993, Rhode Island and Massachusetts had public school programs that were performing at roughly the same level. Massachusetts was only a little bit better than we were. At that time, both states had pending lawsuits by disadvantaged children seeking a declaration of their rights under their state's education clause in their constitutions. In Massachusetts, the court ruled in favor of the children. Within months, the Massachusetts legislature enacted the Education Reform Act of 1993, which laid the foundation for the Bay State's dramatic improvements in public education since that time. In Rhode Island, in 1994, Superior Court Justice Thomas Needham also ruled in favor of the children, paving the way for us to follow the Bay State on the path of educational improvement. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court reversed Justice Needham in a disastrous 1995 decision reminiscent of the United States Supreme Court Plessy versus Ferguson decision in 1896. Recently, the Woonsocket and Pawtucket school committees, whom I represented, brought a new case based on changed conditions, hoping a new Rhode Island Supreme Court would view the issue differently, as had our United States Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education. Unfortunately, in a decision issued in March, that did not happen. With that in mind, I would ask you please to consider the value of giving the people of Rhode Island the opportunity to vote on a constitutional amendment that would create a meaningful, judicially enforceable right to public education in our state, and thereby restore Rhode Island to the national civil rights mainstream and provide our state with a platform to advance our democratic values and economic prosperity. Thank you for your consideration. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any questions? Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that testimony. That was really, really earth-shattering and eye-opening. But you know a lot more about this than I do. You'd mentioned about Massachusetts compared to Rhode Island. But how would you compare, say, the inner city of Massachusetts to Pawtucket or, whatever you may reference that to? You said Narragansett and Pawtucket. But, so I understand that. But Massachusetts, do all their schools do well, like Roxbury or whatever the lower income neighborhoods or schools would be?
Well, what I said in my testimony was substantially all. Massachusetts has a high-stakes testing program, and the great majority of kids from across the Bay State do pass the tests. And obviously, the success rate may be lower in some places rather than others, but they're able to do that because they made a decision in 1993 to give everybody an equal shot. And this is based on these national standards. It's called the National Assessment of Education Progress, or the Nation's Report Card.
You also mentioned education reform. What do you think prevents that in Rhode Island?
I think it's a matter of political will. I think that what happened was the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts in 1993 said, you have to do this. And at that point, the Massachusetts legislature was able to say, well, this is not a political question anymore. This is a right which we have to implement. And they did a great job. In 1995, our Supreme Court said, no, this is a political question which can be resolved through the legislature, and that's just much more difficult to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I have a question. Can you point to the Massachusetts Constitution and tell us where it appears? Where did you find it?
Yeah, the decision is called McDuffie, and I can forward it to the committee offline. But basically, the phrase in their Constitution is that they would cherish the right to education. And that's not necessarily the strongest language one can imagine, but that court found that cherish meant that it was a right, an obligation to provide education to kids. The phrase in Rhode Island's Constitution is promote. And we argued to the court that promote is as strong as cherish, but the court disagreed. And that's why I'm asking you to consider putting more clear language in our Constitution.